Today is September 25, 2024. My name is Rob Carr of Kalamazoo Right to Life, and this is Pro-Life Week. Well, I'm going to be reading portions today of information that I was not aware of until recently. And both of these stories today indirectly deal with the word salad queen, Kamala Harris, the Democratic nominee for president. So let's get started. In August of 2022, so just a few months after the Dobbs decision, a 28-year-old Georgia woman named Amber Thurman discovered she was pregnant and she wanted an abortion. But by the time she found out she was pregnant, it was beyond the legal limit in Georgia. At that time, Georgia, after Roe was overturned, Georgia passed a heartbeat bill, a 6-week heartbeat bill. And this was past the 6-week limit, so she couldn't get a legal abortion in Georgia. So she traveled to North Carolina, planning to get a surgical abortion. Well, what happened was an employee at the abortion clinic gave her the 2 abortion pills instead. And she took those, returned to Georgia, where a few days later, she did expel her dead fetus. But not all of the fetal parts came out. So she she had a severe infection, sepsis, and she went to a local hospital in Georgia, and they sort of misdiagnosed the problem, that it was an incomplete abortion, and she still had fetal remains inside her, and they kind of delayed for about 20 hours. And then by the time she finally did have a D&C, which would have been the logical solution to her problem, she died in the operating table. And around the same time, there was another woman named Candy Miller who didn't quite have the same situation, but she did take the 2 abortion drugs, and she also had rare but an incomplete abortion where parts of the baby remained in her womb, and she had an infection, and she died as well. Well, Kamala Harris is complaining, as is the pro-abortion industry in general. But Kamala Harris is complaining that these 2 women in Georgia died because of this pro-life heartbeat bill. Because her argument is, had there not been a pro-life law, these 2 women would have been able to have regular abortions in Georgia, and they would be alive today if this pro-life heartbeat law had not been in place. Well, enter Dr. Christina Francis, who is the CEO of the American Association of Pro-Life OBGYNs. And I'm now going to be reading here. After watching Harris's comments in Atlanta about the deaths of Thurman and Miller, Dr. Francis said on Wednesday, that's a week ago Wednesday, that she agrees both women's deaths were 100% preventable. Now I'm quoting, however, their deaths were not the fault of Georgia's abortion law. And I'm continuing my quote of Dr. Francis. No pro-life law in the country prevents OBGYNs like me from intervening when a woman is facing a potentially life-threatening complication of her pregnancy. They do not have to be knocking on death's door before we can intervene. In fact, I can speak from experience as I practice in Indiana, which has a very similar law. Madam Vice President, stop lying to my patients. Your lies are harming women and they're harming physicians. Okay, unquote. On Friday, this past Friday, Francis again talked about, quote, the dangerous lies about abortion drugs and the claim that the state abortion laws are killing women. Georgia's abortion law, Francis explained, not only was meant to protect women and children in the state of Georgia, but also is very clear in that doctors can intervene in cases where women are facing potentially life-threatening complications of their pregnancy, or even if they have a chronic medical condition that poses a severe threat to their life or physical health. Miller, the OBGYN, pointed out that this is the Candy Miller, the other woman in Georgia, avoided going to see the doctor with these complications because she had heard the lies about Georgia's abortion law and was afraid to go to the doctor, that she wouldn't receive the care that she needed or that she would be prosecuted. There is not a single law in this country that prosecutes women who have had abortions, Francis continued. And I'm going to continue with her quote. And there's not a single law in the entire country that prevents doctors like me from intervening to manage complications, especially complications that we see routinely after women take abortion drugs. Candy and Amber, the two women from Georgia, who we heard about yesterday, both suffered severe complications from abortion drugs. I'm going to repeat that. Both suffered severe complications from abortion drugs that potentially led to their deaths. It's important for women to understand that these drugs carry inherent risks, and the way they're being dispensed online now, you can get it through the mail or through these telemedical medicine interviews, because of the DNA's reckless actions in removing medical supervision is especially dangerous. It's time for these lies to stop. Stop putting a political agenda ahead of women's health. So thank you, Dr. Francis, for just being honest about this whole situation about chemical abortion. It is not safe, and for these two women, it was a life-threatening situation where they were not under the care of a physician by administering these two abortion drugs, and then they kind of self-aborted. The baby was expelled, but not all of the baby. They had infections and they died. They didn't die from a pro-life law. They died from chemical abortions. Okay. Now, I heard this yesterday. Word salad queen Kamala Harris said that the Senate filibuster should be abolished so that a pro-abortion, well, she would have called it a pro-choice or reproductive rights bill could be passed. But she seems to imply that the filibuster would not be totally abolished, but only for various select reasons. And of course, advancing a pro-abortion agenda is one of those select reasons. But she seems to be hedging on this whole election cycle regarding the U.S. Senate. Because just imagine if the Republicans take the Senate and the Republicans retain control of the House, they take the Senate, and Donald Trump becomes president. So all of a sudden, we don't have divided government. The Republicans have the Oval Office and both houses of Congress. And let's suppose early next year, a pro-life majority in, let's say, the House introduces a pro-life bill of some degree. Trump's already said that abortion is the realm now of state governments, the citizens of the states. But let's suppose a bill is introduced in the House, and it passes. And it goes to the Senate. It's introduced by a pro-life senator. You know what's going to happen. The very Democrats who have been clamoring for the last 2 years that the filibuster in the Senate must be abolished because it's an archaic, racist way that blocks legislation. You know darn well that the Democrats who've been fighting against the filibuster will use the filibuster immediately to block that pro-life bill, that legislation in the U.S. Senate. You know they'll do that. They will filibuster every pro-life bill. They will probably filibuster every initiative that Donald Trump wants to pass because they want Donald Trump not to succeed. I mean, we know that. I mean, it's true. The Republicans probably did not want Joe Biden to succeed. But we know for sure that the Democrats will filibuster everything that the Republican Senate will introduce. And the reason I'm confident of this is what I think I've said before, that as things stand right now, the Senate is 51 Democrats, 49 Republicans, and the Senate race in West Virginia is going to be won by the Republican. Joe Manchin is retiring, and West Virginia is so Republican that I think Donald Trump won both times by like 40%. So that seat in West Virginia will be taken by a Republican, the current governor. So that makes it 50-50. If no other House race changes, it's 50-50. And then in Montana, John Tester, the Democrat, very likely will be defeated in his re-election bid, and he'll be replaced by a pro-life Republican. And that'll give them 51 Republicans and now 49 Democrats. So very likely the Republicans will take the Senate, and there will be a pro-life majority in that upper chamber. And that's good news. So we've got about 40 plus days to the election. Kamala Harris must lose. Ms. Slotkin, who's running for the U.S. Senate in Michigan, she must be defeated too. The GOP must, and I believe they will, take the Senate, and they must retain control of the U.S. House. The Republicans, the pro-life Republicans, must take control of the Michigan House. I'd love to see the Michigan Senate, but that's not up for election this time. We must take the Michigan House. We only need, I think, 2 seats to retake majority, because we must stop Gretchen Whitmer from advancing her crazed, obsessed pro-abortion agenda. Because if we lose again and we don't have control of the state house, be warned, next year they will try to pass a bill that will eliminate parental consent for abortion. They will try it. And if we don't have the majority, we cannot stop it. And they will introduce legislation to legalize physician-assisted suicide. They will do those 2 things in 2025. We must stop them. And to do that, we must win back the state house. More about that as we get closer to the November election. With that, I'll let you go, and I'll see you next time.